The void of human space was vast and silent, an ocean of stars stretching beyond reckoning. On its edges, systems had been colonized by humans who had survived centuries of hardship, worlds stripped by environmental collapse, outposts abandoned by empires that did not care, and planets whose soils had hardened under the harshest suns. Humanity thrived where others feared to tread, not through overwhelming power, but through ingenuity, adaptation, and a stubborn refusal to yield. News arrived like a shadow across the networks of every frontier settlement. The Draconian Fleet had crossed the rim, 1,000 warships, massive and meticulously constructed, bearing the insignia of an empire that had devoured hundreds of worlds without hesitation. Reports of annihilation followed them like an echo, entire civilizations obliterated before a single fleet could respond, systems emptied, and fleets crushed in days that felt like hours to the victims. The Draconians were absolute, methodical, and unrelenting. And now, they were here. Command centers across human space were thrown into chaos. Fleet coordinators ran simulations, engineers recalculated warp trajectories, and planetary defenses were activated for the first time in centuries. But amid the panic, there was something unexpected. Humans did not despair. They had faced impossible odds before: climate collapse, rogue AI uprisings, asteroid storms that could tear cities from the surface, and survived. Each encounter had honed their minds, their ships, and their instincts. Humanity did not fear the Draconians. They understood the stakes, and they would meet them head-on. The first fleets moved into formation, not to challenge the Draconians, but to observe. Sensor sweeps revealed the immensity of the enemy armada, spires of weaponry, shields shimmering with destructive potential, and hulls that dwarfed any human construction. But where the Draconians expected fear, they found calculation. Where they anticipated retreat, they found strategy. And where they predicted surrender, they encountered resolve. Human ships darted through the void like shards of light. Small but fast, their hulls bearing the scars of survival. Engines glowed faintly, leaving trails of plasma in complex arcs that no Draconian algorithm could predict. They were adaptive, flexible, and aware of every threat in ways that machines and empire calculations could not comprehend. The Draconian fleet, vast as it was, found itself reacting to movements it could not anticipate. For the first time in history, the Empire faced a species whose very survival strategy defied control. Commanders aboard the Draconian flagship recalculated coordinates, adjusted weapon vectors, and reprogrammed targeting algorithms. Every prediction collapsed within seconds. Human vessels flowed through energy grids like rivers threading between boulders, avoiding annihilation not by firepower but by ingenuity and timing. Each small maneuver left the Draconians unsettled, confused, and increasingly aware that they were facing something entirely unexpected, a species that had learned to live in impossibility. As the first engagement drew near, a human reconnaissance ship paused near the frontier system of Kale's Reach, a planet once on the brink of ecological collapse. Sensors flared in anticipation of attack, yet the humans did not fire. They did not retreat, they simply observed, recording the positions of Draconian vessels, scanning energy signatures, and transmitting data back to command centers across human space. Their silence was deliberate, their calm, unnerving, and it was teaching the Draconians the first lesson they would never forget. Power is not only in destruction, it is in knowledge, patience, and adaptation. The Draconian fleet expected compliance. They expected terror. They expected bodies to fall in precise patterns according to their centuries-old strategies. What they did not expect was the unexpected itself: humans who moved with foresight, who adapted faster than weapons could fire, and who possessed an instinct for survival that no calculation could contain. In the orbital platforms above Kale's Reach, civilian populations watched as colossal ships of the Draconian fleet cast shadows over their cities. Alarm systems blared, shields hummed, and the anticipation of annihilation was palpable. Yet the humans did not strike. Instead, they maneuvered in ways that stabilized the planet's orbit, rerouted volatile energy flows, and, without engagement, reduced the risk of collateral damage. In doing so, they demonstrated a principle the Draconians could not understand: that survival was not conquest. And that intelligence applied with moral clarity could outmatch even the mightiest armada. By the time the Draconian fleet's initial wave had reached the inner system, several of their squadrons had lost contact with human ships. Not destroyed, not captured, vanished, inexplicable. Reports flooded command networks, entire divisions untraceable. The Draconians recalculated, rerouted, and struck again, only to find the humans already in positions no simulation had predicted, observing. learning, and moving onward with fluid precision. Historians on both sides of the conflict would later argue over the cause. Some said the humans had discovered a manipulation of space itself, corridors hidden in gravitational anomalies, and subspace rifts that allowed instantaneous repositioning. Others insisted it was pure instinct, honed by generations surviving where no one else could. But one truth remained: the Draconian fleet had encountered something beyond comprehension. They had entered human space expecting conquest. And instead they had found an entity that could not be contained, could not be predicted, and, for the first time, could not be intimidated. As the humans continued their silent advance, the Draconians convened in their great command halls. Decisions were made, fleets repositioned, weapons calibrated to maximum output. And yet, for all the Empire's experience, knowledge, and power, one certainty haunted every officer: the humans were not merely surviving. They were teaching the fleet a lesson in adaptability, resilience, and ingenuity, and no empire had ever been taught in such a way before. The first encounter of what would become a historic confrontation had passed without the expected carnage. Humans had moved through impossible odds, left no casualties among their own, and demonstrated an understanding of space and strategy the Draconians could not match. A single idea took root among the Draconian commanders, spreading through fleets like wildfire: these humans were not ordinary. They were something more. A species whose survival instincts were a weapon, whose intelligence was a shield, and whose moral clarity was a force the galaxy had never encountered. And as the Draconian fleet prepared for the next wave, one thought haunted every calculation, every plan, every prediction: they were entering a space where humanity's will was absolute, and where nothing, not fleets, not weapons, not centuries of empire, could contain it. The war had begun, but the humans had already rewritten the rules. The Draconian fleet staggered under a realization they had never faced before. The humans did not fight like anyone expected. They did not charge headlong. They did not rely on sheer firepower. They moved as though the universe itself bent subtly to their understanding, turning every obstacle into an advantage. Where the Draconians anticipated engagement, they found observation. Where they expected surrender, they discovered strategy. The humans were not merely surviving, they were orchestrating the battlefield itself. Scouts and reconnaissance vessels of the Draconian Armada reported anomalies that defied comprehension. Entire squadrons disappeared from sensors, only to reappear in positions previously impossible, threading the fleet like water through rocks. Weapons fired along calculated trajectories missed by fractions of a second, shields that should have been breached held firm, and communication arrays recorded data that contradicted every prior understanding of physics. Human ingenuity had become the first, most dangerous weapon the Draconians had ever encountered. In the inner sector of a star system known as Caldrus, humans had begun exploiting gravitational anomalies with uncanny precision. Small vessels darted through fields of debris left by ancient wars, using asteroid belts as cover while twisting through magnetic currents that would have shredded Draconian ships. They did not destroy what they passed; instead, they observed, mapped, and adapted. Each human movement was calculated, not by machines, but by instinct refined over generations of surviving the impossible. On board the Draconian flagship, tension rippled through the corridors. Officers argued over the fleet's failures, recalculating, repositioning, trying desperately to predict the next move. Each human action proved the algorithms wrong, each maneuver exposing weaknesses the Empire had never known existed. The humans were rewriting the rules of war simply by moving, simply by surviving, simply by thinking in ways the Draconians had dismissed as impossible. For a moment, the humans paused near the planet's orbital ring, a subtle movement that unsettled the Draconians. Sensors detected nothing hostile: no energy spikes, no weapons charging, no shields shimmering. Yet every Draconian commander felt the presence of something deliberate, intelligent, and beyond comprehension. The humans were teaching without speaking, asserting control without fighting, and instilling fear without aggression. Meanwhile, human fleets continued to weave through the system with elegance that belied the stakes. One pilot maneuvered through a collapsing gravity well, using the environmental turbulence to mask his fleet's position. Another detached vessel neutralized a rogue satellite threatening civilians, then rejoined formation before the Draconians could detect a pattern. Small fleets acted independently, yet in perfect synchronization, each movement amplifying the effectiveness of the others. The result was chaos for the Draconian calculations and perfection in human execution. In the orbital control stations of the outer colonies, civilians watched through observation decks, their fear giving way to awe. They saw massive alien warships falter, their formations breaking as if an invisible hand guided the humans. Ships that should have been destroyed maneuvered flawlessly through impossible positions. Entire fleets of humans executed strategies that seemed almost alive, reacting to draconian fire before it even existed. The lesson was clear: humans had turned survival into an art form, and the Draconians were the first audience to witness it. The Draconian admirals convened a council in the flagship's central chamber. They debated retreat, engagement, and recalibration. Ancient officers argued over lost squadrons, attempting to rationalize the anomalies. And yet, amid the chaos of deliberation, one undeniable truth emerged: they were not confronting a typical species. These humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and methodical in ways the Empire had never anticipated. A war they had expected to win in days was now a puzzle they could not solve. Humans did not wait for battle. They moved toward the systems the Draconians considered strategic. Not with aggression, but with intent. Supply stations were repaired, orbital debris redirected, and gravitational hazards mitigated without a single act of violence. Every action demonstrated a principle the Draconians could not understand: power was not only in destruction. Power was in observation, in adaptation, and in surviving where others failed. Humanity's presence was a silent assertion that endurance and intelligence could surpass even the most overwhelming force. One human captain, aboard a reconnaissance vessel barely larger than a Draconian fighter, maneuvered through a dense asteroid field to observe an enemy dreadnought. The human ship's sensors flickered, adaptive shields shifted, and navigation systems compensated for every irregularity in real time. The Draconian dreadnought fired volleys, but the human vessel weaved through them, almost leisurely, gathering data while exposing the enemy's vulnerabilities. The humans did not attack, they exploited knowledge. Turning observation into power, the fleet's pattern confounded the Draconian war machines. Algorithms recalculated billions of possible outcomes, only to find each one invalid. Squadrons lost contact with the human fleet entirely, reporting anomalies that no standard protocol could explain. It became clear that the humans were not following conventional rules of engagement, they were inventing their own, using creativity and instinct as tools of war. As the first day of confrontation passed, the Draconian fleet's morale began to falter. Commanders struggled to maintain cohesion, ships that should have been coordinated moved unpredictably under the humans' subtle influence. It was a war fought not with firepower alone, but with wit, strategy, and the indomitable will to endure. Humanity's resilience became a force multiplier, amplifying the effectiveness of each vessel, each maneuver, and each decision in ways the Draconians could not anticipate. By nightfall, one startling realization settled across the Draconian armada. Humans did not need to destroy fleets to win. Humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and survive every assault without ever firing a shot. Entire squadrons vanished, reappearing in unexpected positions, having turned danger into opportunity. The Draconians could no longer predict human behavior, no longer rely on calculations, and no longer assume victory. Humanity had become a force that existed beyond convention, an unstoppable, adaptable, and terrifyingly clever presence in the galaxy. And as the humans continued their advance into the frontier systems, leaving behind fleets in disarray, one thought echoed in every Draconian mind: they were entering a war they could never control, facing a species they could never predict, and witnessing the first lesson in a power that could not be contained. The humans moved onward, not with aggression, not with malice, but with unyielding precision, determination, and intelligence. Their survival was absolute, their adaptability unmatched, and their presence a statement the Draconians would remember for generations. In the cold silence of space, illuminated by the distant suns and the shattered remains of systems long abandoned, the Draconian fleet realized the terrifying truth: they were facing a species that would not flinch, would not falter, and would not yield. And in that realization, the first seeds of fear were sown. The Draconian fleet, once confident in its ability to consume worlds and annihilate civilizations, now faced an unfamiliar sensation: uncertainty. Every attempt at aggression met with failure, every calculation undone, every expectation shattered. Commanders who had ruled fleets for centuries could not understand what they were facing. Humanity did not fight like anyone had anticipated. They moved through the void not as invaders, but as orchestrators of survival, turning every hazard into advantage, every threat into a lesson. In the deep reaches of the Tyros cluster, a fleet of human vessels approached a derelict system abandoned long ago. Draconian scouts detected them and moved to intercept, unleashing volleys of high-energy disruptors intended to obliterate the intruders before they could reach the planet's orbit. The human ships did not dodge recklessly, They flowed through the attacks with precision that seemed instinctual, their shields adjusting to energy flows in real time, engines twisting around gravitational eddies that would have shattered any other vessel. The Draconians fired again, faster, more concentrated. But each salvo was anticipated, mitigated, and nullified without the humans ever breaking formation. The humans were not attacking. They were observing, they were learning. Every movement they made collected data, analyzed the enemy, and responded before the enemy knew what had happened. Small human fighter wings darted between colossal warships, scanning weak points, testing shield resilience, and probing for vulnerabilities, all without triggering the slightest aggression. It was a demonstration of intelligence applied as power, and it terrified the Draconians. On board the Draconian flagship, whispers of disbelief spread through the corridors. Officers reviewed reports of entire squadrons vanishing mid-engagement. Some suggested that the humans had somehow manipulated subspace or folded the very fabric of space to their will. Others argued it was instinct, a reflex honed over centuries of surviving against impossible odds. One admiral, long hardened by conquest, could only mutter, "They are not like anything we have ever faced. They do not fight to destroy. They fight to endure." The humans, meanwhile, approached the planet's atmosphere. Satellites long inactive drifted in orbit, remnants of past conflicts and abandoned civilizations. Rather than ignoring them, the human fleet repaired and stabilized them, rerouting energy flows and preventing dangerous collisions. The Draconians expected destruction, but found that the humans' careful attention minimized risk while asserting control. Humanity's presence was not violent, it was purposeful, deliberate, and incomprehensibly precise. A young human captain piloted a scout vessel through a cluster of collapsing moons. Sensors flared, shields flared, and engines adjusted continuously to compensate for gravitational fluctuations. Behind him, larger vessels mimicked the maneuver, their hulls barely grazing the debris while the Draconian fleet struggled to anticipate their trajectory. One massive Draconian battleship fired a full salvo, expecting to obliterate the human wing. Every shot missed by a fraction. Every shield held, every weapon array recalculated in real time, as if the human fleet itself was a living organism responding to threats instinctively. Across the galaxy, news of the anomaly reached outer systems. Frontier colonies who had long feared the Draconians now watched in awe as humans moved like shadows among the stars, untouched, undeterred, and unafraid. Civilians on observation decks saw massive warships falter, sensors failing, and energy discharges that should have incinerated human vessels miss entirely. The humans did not even react to attacks, they navigated around them, learning, adapting, and teaching. Inside the Draconian Council chambers, tension escalated. Generals shouted over one another, debating fleet maneuvers and recalculations. Scientists argued over the impossible readings, fleets disappearing, subspace fluctuations, energy signatures defying physics. Yet amid the panic, a single concept crystallized: these humans were beyond conventional warfare. They were not conquerors, they were survivors, and they were teaching the Draconians that survival could be a weapon more devastating than any armament. The humans continued their advance into the Tyros cluster, not attacking, not destroying, but mapping, observing, and neutralizing hazards. One vessel diverted a rogue asteroid threatening a colony, while another stabilized the orbit of a drifting moon. Each act of precision demonstrated an understanding of space and physics that no Draconian fleet had anticipated. Humanity's ability to endure had become a form of dominance, one the Empire could not measure or confront with weapons. As night fell across the system, the Draconian fleet attempted an aggressive maneuver, a pincer movement designed to trap the humans against the outer planets. The humans anticipated the strategy before it could be executed. Vessels split into multiple corridors, each threading through gravitational turbulence with flawless execution. Draconian ships collided with debris fields. Shields overloaded, and formations broke apart as the humans emerged unscathed on the other side. It was not speed that saved them, not firepower, not numbers. It was adaptability, foresight, and instinct, a combination no empire had ever faced. The human silence was deafening. No weapons fired, no shields flared in aggression, yet the Draconians felt pressure in every sector. Entire fleets that had once projected authority now hesitated, paralyzed by the humans' precision and unpredictability. The humans did not need to attack, their presence alone rewrote the rules of engagement. Every maneuver was both defensive and offensive, a testament to strategy, intelligence, and survival perfected over centuries of adversity. By the time the fleet had cleared the Tyros cluster, several Draconian squadrons had vanished entirely. Not destroyed, not captured, simply gone. Sensors detected anomalies, voids in space where energy readings no longer read. Human ingenuity had transcended mere tactics. They had transformed space itself into a tool, using observation, adaptation, and precision as their first and deadliest weapon. The Draconians regrouped near the edge of the cluster, attempting to understand what had happened. Admiral Karthos, a veteran of countless campaigns, addressed his council. "We cannot predict them. We cannot trap them. Every calculation fails. And yet, they have not even attacked. They do not fight to destroy, they fight to endure. This is not combat as we know it. This is something else entirely." And as the human fleet continued onward, weaving silently through the void, repairing systems, stabilizing hazards, and avoiding conflict while learning every pattern of the Draconians, one chilling truth became evident: the Empire had met a species it could not comprehend, could not contain, and could not predict. Humanity was not just surviving, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson in endurance, intelligence, and moral clarity that would echo across every star system for centuries to come. The Draconians realized, with dawning horror, that they were witnessing a force beyond conventional warfare. A species that did not flinch, did not panic, and did not yield. And the first seeds of fear, subtle but persistent, had begun to take root across every fleet. The humans moved onward, silently, precisely, with a calm certainty that unnerved even the oldest officers. They were not merely present in the galaxy, they were asserting that survival itself was a weapon, and no empire, no fleet, no matter how vast, could withstand it. And in the cold expanse of space, illuminated by the distant light of dying stars, the Draconians understood a terrifying truth: this confrontation had already been lost, not by fire, but by a species. The Draconian fleet's pride, once unshakable, had begun to fracture. Days of chasing shadows through collapsing star systems had left commanders questioning their own strategies. Squadrons that had once executed flawless maneuvers now staggered under the weight of human ingenuity. For every calculated strike the Draconians attempted, humanity had a countermove that was precise, preemptive, and unnervingly elegant. It was not firepower alone that defeated them, it was anticipation, adaptation, and an understanding of space that seemed almost alive. In the system of Lyra's crucible, where binary suns churned clouds of radiation and asteroid belts spiraled unpredictably, the humans pressed forward. Their vessels weaved through energy storms, magnetic turbulence, and shifting gravitational currents with fluid precision. Each ship acted independently yet remained in perfect harmony with the fleet. Human pilots communicated not only through conventional channels but through an instinctual synchronization, allowing them to anticipate maneuvers across hundreds of kilometers of void. The Draconians attempted a coordinated strike, concentrating their firepower on a convoy of human vessels transporting critical supplies to the frontier colonies. Their calculations predicted annihilation within minutes. But the humans did not scatter. They did not panic. Instead, they danced through the onslaught like liquid threads in the storm. Missiles detonated harmlessly in empty voids, energy beams struck only empty space, and shields flared to absorb attacks that had been aimed with the precision of 1,000 simulations. On board one human command ship, the captain observed the enemy movements with a mixture of focus and calm. Fleet positions were marked, energy flows analyzed, and weaknesses catalogued in real time. Small fighter wings darted ahead, probing shield integrity, testing weapon synchronization, and gathering critical data. Every action was deliberate, every maneuver precise, yet executed with the subtlety of a predator stalking its prey. The humans were not merely defending, they were teaching the battlefield itself how to respond to them. The Draconians, however, refused to yield. Their admiral, Karthos, ordered a concentrated pincer movement to trap the human fleet between two massive warships. Every vessel in the armada adjusted, shields glowing, engines straining. It was a maneuver designed to end the humans' advance in a single, crushing blow. Yet even this, the humans anticipated. They split into multiple corridors of movement, each vessel threading through collapsing moons, magnetic storms, and asteroid debris, emerging in positions the Draconians had considered impossible. The pincer became a cage that snapped shut on empty space, leaving Draconian commanders to question every assumption. In orbital stations on Lyra's crucible, civilians watched the movements of both fleets with wide eyes. Massive alien warships loomed like black monoliths, engines glowing with destructive potential. Yet the humans moved silently, deliberately, avoiding confrontation yet asserting control in every interaction. They stabilized debris fields, rerouted hazardous energy currents, and repaired failing satellite systems, all without firing a shot. It was a demonstration of intelligence as power, strategy as survival, and foresight as dominance. One small squadron of human fighters performed what would later be called the Weave of Lyra. They darted through gravitational eddies and energy turbulence with perfect timing, mapping weaknesses in the Draconian shields and relaying that data to the main fleet. The Draconians, unable to comprehend the maneuver, attempted to track the squadron with sensors that failed repeatedly. Weapons fired, calculations misfired, and one by one, squadrons were forced to retreat or risk collision with their own fleet. Humanity's ingenuity had transformed the battlefield into a living system, one that responded to every threat and rendered even the mightiest vessels ineffective. The Draconian flagship trembled under the psychological weight of the encounter. Commanders whispered to each other about anomalies, fleets vanishing, and enemy strategies that defied reason. The humans were teaching without words, demonstrating an ability to survive where others would perish, to manipulate the environment without aggression, and to assert dominance through intelligence and foresight. Every moment of hesitation, every misstep by the Empire, was a lesson that would echo through Draconian command for generations. Meanwhile, human capital ships moved through the expanse like ghosts. They stabilized dying planets, repaired orbital stations, and redirected hazardous asteroids, leaving a path of order in chaos. The Draconians expected destruction, yet the humans offered none. Their presence alone destabilized formations, confused targeting arrays, and forced recalculation at every turn. By the time the Draconian fleet reached the outer rim of the system, the humans had already established positions near vital energy nodes and supply depots, demonstrating that control could be asserted without violence. Aboard a reconnaissance vessel, a young human officer observed a Draconian dreadnought attempting to maneuver through a collapsing subspace corridor. The ship's shields were tested, weapons firing blindly, yet the humans adapted instantly, using environmental turbulence to mask fleet movement. In the span of a few minutes, the humans turned an attempt at aggression into an opportunity, gathering data, identifying weaknesses, and positioning the fleet for optimal survival. The Draconians had learned something fundamental: humans did not fight to destroy, they fought to endure, and in doing so, they redefined the very nature of conflict. As the hours stretched into a full day, the Draconian fleet's cohesion began to erode. Squadrons faltered, ships collided, and communication delays amplified confusion. Human forces moved with precision, yet in ways that appeared organic, instinctual, and beyond conventional understanding. Every maneuver, every adjustment, every observation amplified their effectiveness while leaving the Draconians scrambling to catch up. Humanity's survival was a weapon, and they wielded it with unparalleled mastery. By the end of the day, the Draconians realized the unsettling truth: they were confronting a force they could not predict, could not trap, and could not defeat through conventional means. Humans had transcended the expected, using intelligence, foresight, and moral clarity as tools of dominance. Entire squadrons vanished without a trace, strategic nodes were secured without aggression, and the very battlefield seemed to bend around the human fleet's will. In council chambers aboard the Draconian flagship, officers debated retreat, engagement, and recalibration. Yet one undeniable fact haunted them: humans had not even attacked with intent to kill, and yet the Empire had already suffered countless losses in terms of strategy, coordination, and morale. Every human maneuver was both a demonstration and a warning. This species could not be contained, and every encounter would test the limits of the Empire's understanding. And as the human fleet continued its advance, stabilizing systems, navigating chaos, and turning danger into opportunity, one realization settled over the Draconians like a shadow: humanity did not merely survive. Humanity endured, they adapted, they taught, and they had made it painfully clear that the Draconian fleet had entered a war it could not win, against a species it could not predict. And in a galaxy where survival itself had become the ultimate weapon. The humans moved forward, not recklessly, not aggressively, but with calculated precision, leaving the Draconians to face the terrifying clarity of their own miscalculations. They had entered human space expecting conquest, yet they found themselves facing something far more dangerous: a species that could survive the impossible, bend the environment to its will, and redefine the rules of engagement with every decision. And in that silence, in the void between stars, the Draconians understood a truth that would echo across the Empire: the humans were not only unbroken, they were unstoppable. The Draconian fleet staggered as the humans pushed deeper into their territory. Every plan, every calculation, every projection of force had been rendered irrelevant. Where the Empire expected chaos, they found order; where they expected fear, they encountered resolve. Humanity had transformed the battlefield into a labyrinth only they could navigate, turning every obstacle, every hazard, every ambush into an opportunity to demonstrate mastery, precision, and an unyielding will to endure. In the orbital zone of Zephyria Prime, a planet surrounded by dense asteroid belts and unstable magnetic storms, the Draconians attempted a final coordinated strike. They concentrated firepower on a human convoy carrying critical supplies and reinforcements, expecting annihilation in minutes. The humans did not scatter. They did not flinch. Instead, they flowed through the assault like water weaving through stone, using the storm's turbulence to mask their positions and turning the very environment into a shield. Missiles detonated harmlessly in empty voids, energy beams struck nothing, and the human fleet emerged intact and unscathed, leaving Draconian commanders stunned into silence. A single human scout darted through the debris, weaving between asteroids with such fluidity that the pursuing Draconians could not track it. On board, the pilot manipulated gravitational currents to maximize evasive potential, gathering critical data on enemy formations. Behind him, larger vessels mirrored his maneuvers, forming a living network of coordinated movement that seemed almost sentient. Every action collected intelligence, every movement exposed vulnerabilities, and every decision reinforced the human's ability to survive in impossible conditions. The Draconian command attempted to adapt. Dreadnoughts repositioned, squadrons regrouped, and advanced weapon systems recalibrated. Yet every attempt to corner or predict the humans failed. The humans' understanding of the battlefield transcended simple strategy. It was instinct, foresight, and ingenuity combined into a force the Empire could neither anticipate nor contain. Squadrons that vanished in one sector reappeared in another, often in positions that maximized efficiency and minimized risk. Humanity's mastery of space had become a weapon of its own making. Within the corridors of the Draconian flagship, tension grew to a palpable fever. Officers whispered over sensor reports, debating over anomalies and disappearing squadrons. Generals shouted over one another, arguing over failed maneuvers and the fleet's inability to engage the humans effectively. Even the most seasoned commanders admitted, in hushed tones, that their centuries of experience were useless against a species that moved with purpose beyond expectation. Humanity did not fight to destroy, they fought to survive, and in surviving, they taught the Empire a lesson in intelligence, adaptability, and patience. The humans' advance was relentless, yet calculated. They did not fire unless necessary, choosing instead to stabilize systems, repair failing orbital arrays, and redirect hazards away from frontier colonies. Each action demonstrated control without aggression, authority without intimidation, and intelligence without malice. In the eyes of the Draconians, the humans' restraint was terrifying. They could have obliterated entire fleets and systems, yet chose to act with precision, purpose, and clarity of intent that no empire had ever witnessed. In one daring maneuver, a small human fleet threaded through a collapsing gravitational corridor near Zephyr's outer moons. Magnetic turbulence, asteroid collisions, and radiation surges threatened to destroy any vessel that attempted passage. Yet the humans passed through as though guided by the very stars themselves, mapping enemy positions and relaying critical data to the main fleet. The Draconians fired blindly, but every attack missed its target. The human vessels emerged in formation on the far side of the system, unscathed and ready for the next phase of their advance. Across the galaxy, frontier colonies watched the silent ballet unfold with awe. Massive alien warships faltered, engines straining, shields flickering, as humans moved with an almost supernatural grace. Civilians observed from orbital platforms as fleets vanished and reappeared, dodging fire that should have been fatal. And positioning themselves strategically without aggression. Humanity's survival had become a statement, their movement a message. The galaxy had underestimated them, and that miscalculation would be their undoing. On board the human command vessel, fleet captains coordinated movements with precision. Fighters scouted ahead, capital ships stabilized regions of space, and data was collected relentlessly. Every human pilot acted independently, yet in perfect synchrony with the rest of the fleet. The Draconians could predict nothing, could anticipate nothing, and were forced to watch as humans navigated hazards and threats with an almost uncanny understanding of space itself. Intelligence, foresight, and instinct had become their most devastating weapons. The Draconian admirals convened an emergency council. Frustration, fear, and disbelief rippled through the room. Strategies that had conquered hundreds of civilizations crumbled in the face of human ingenuity. Fleets once invincible were scattered. Sensors failed, and communication networks faltered. Entire squadrons had vanished without destruction or capture. The humans had not only survived, they had outmaneuvered, outthought, and outlasted the Empire's most powerful forces. The realization was simple yet terrifying: they were not facing an enemy to defeat, they were confronting a force that could not be defeated. In the outer reaches of the Zephyria system, the humans executed what would later be remembered as the Eclipse Maneuver. Fighters split into multiple paths, exploiting gravitational anomalies and magnetic currents, while capital ships maintained perfect alignment with supply depots and frontier colonies. Draconian fleets attempted to intercept, but miscalculations and environmental hazards forced retreats. The humans did not celebrate victory, they moved with silent determination, correcting imbalances, stabilizing threats, and continuing their methodical advance. By the end of the day, the Draconians faced an undeniable truth. Humanity had redefined warfare. It was not in brute force, overwhelming firepower, or the destruction of worlds. It was in intelligence, precision, and survival. Humanity's ability to endure, adapt, and anticipate had transformed them from a species to a phenomenon, a force the Empire could not comprehend, could not predict, and could not contain. And as the human fleet moved onward, leaving the Draconians scrambling to maintain order, one realization spread through every ship, every command center, and every officer: these were not merely opponents to fight. They were a species that had turned survival into power, intelligence into weapons, and moral clarity into dominance. The Draconians had entered human space expecting conquest, yet found themselves facing something far more formidable, a species that would never flinch, never yield, and could not be defeated. In the silence of space, illuminated by distant suns and drifting remnants of past battles, the humans pressed forward with unyielding determination. Every maneuver, every calculation, every silent decision reinforced the truth that the Draconian fleet had underestimated them. Humanity had become a force of inevitability, an unstoppable presence in the void, and a lesson the Empire would never forget. And as the Draconians regrouped, the first seeds of dread took root in the hearts of even the most seasoned admirals. They were no longer facing a fleet, they were witnessing the embodiment of survival itself. The Draconian fleet had entered human space expecting conquest. Yet every expectation had been shattered. Days of futile pursuit and failed maneuvers had left commanders questioning everything they had once believed about strategy, power, and superiority. Their fleets were fractured, their confidence eroded, and their calculations meaningless. Humanity did not fight like anyone else. They moved through the void with purpose, precision, and an instinctual mastery of the environment that no empire could anticipate or resist. In the dense asteroid belt of the Vorith expanse, humans prepared for a confrontation that the Draconians had believed would mark their final victory. A fleet of capital ships, supported by squadrons of nimble fighters, advanced with silent determination. Every movement was deliberate, every position calculated, and yet, to the Draconians observing, it seemed almost organic, an intelligent organism flowing through space, responding to threats before they existed. Admiral Karthos convened his generals aboard the flagship, their faces pale with anxiety. "We cannot predict them," he admitted. "We cannot trap them. Every plan fails, every calculation is wrong. And yet, they have not even attacked with intent to destroy." The room was silent. For the first time in centuries, the Draconian leadership confronted the reality that they were not facing a conventional enemy. They were facing survival itself, embodied, deliberate, and unstoppable. The humans advanced toward the central hub of the Vorith expanse, a region of unstable gravitational currents, residual energy storms, and derelict moons. Draconian scouts had warned that no ship could navigate the turbulence unscathed. The humans did not hesitate. Capital ships twisted through radiation fields, fighters darted through collapsing debris streams, and each vessel synchronized perfectly with the next. Sensors tracking them reported impossible velocities and trajectories. Every attempt to predict or intercept failed, leaving Draconian commanders scrambling to react. The first exchange of fire occurred not with aggression, but with precision. One Draconian dreadnought attempted to disable a human vessel, firing a concentrated salvo designed to obliterate it in seconds. The target did not evade recklessly, it flowed through the attack with calculated timing, using a collapsing magnetic storm to mask its movement. Missiles detonated harmlessly, shields absorbed stray energy, and the human vessel emerged unscathed, relaying sensor data that would inform every fleet movement in the coming hours. In the orbital corridors above the exoplanet of Zephyra, human fighters executed a maneuver later dubbed the Spiral of Survival. Each ship twisted through gravitational anomalies, magnetic eddies, and energy disruptions, gathering intelligence and repositioning in a pattern that confused and demoralized the Draconians. Entire squadrons of the Empire found themselves trapped, unable to fire without risking collision or friendly fire, while the humans emerged on the far side of the system, ready for the next stage of their advance. The Draconians responded with everything they had. Concentrated fleets, long-range bombardments, and coordinated strikes attempted to corral the humans, but every plan was undone. Humans did not fight to destroy, they adapted, survived, and turned every hazard into an advantage. Even the most powerful warships found themselves ineffective, their shields faltering, their weapons misaligned, as if the humans had anticipated each attack before it was launched. In the midst of the chaos, human command vessels stabilized orbital stations, repaired failing communication arrays, and neutralized hazardous debris. They did not celebrate victory or taunt the enemy. Their presence alone asserted control. Every movement was an assertion of intelligence, foresight, and moral clarity. The Draconians had underestimated what it meant to survive, and in doing so, had underestimated the humans themselves. By mid-cycle, entire Draconian squadrons had vanished. Not destroyed, not captured, gone. Sensor readings indicated anomalies in subspace, gravitational distortions, and energy readings that contradicted themselves. The humans had not fired upon them, yet their influence on the battlefield had rendered the Empire's greatest assets useless. Humanity's mastery of survival had become a weapon more effective than any beam, missile, or dreadnought. The Draconian Admiralty convened a desperate council. Shouts echoed through the chamber. Officers argued over failed strategies, lost fleets, and unaccounted anomalies. Simulations had failed, predictions had failed, and all the while, the humans advanced, calmly, methodically, and without hesitation. Every action reinforced the principle that survival could be wielded as power, intelligence could act as offense, and moral clarity could assert dominance without destruction. One final attempt to halt the human advance involved a coordinated trap. Fleets converged from multiple systems, forming a corridor meant to crush the humans between overwhelming force and environmental hazards. The humans, however, did not panic. They split into multiple trajectories, weaving through the trap with precision that bordered on the impossible. Fighters darted through collapsing debris, capital ships maneuvered around magnetic turbulence, and the Draconian fleet found themselves unable to engage effectively. What had been designed as annihilation became their humiliation. Observing from observation platforms, frontier colonies marveled at what unfolded. Massive warships faltered, shields flared, and energy discharges collided harmlessly with empty space. The humans moved silently, with calm determination, reshaping every hazard into an advantage. It was not aggression that won the day, it was intelligence, adaptation, and the refusal to be defeated. Every movement, every calculation, every adjustment demonstrated that survival itself could dominate even the mightiest empire. As the final hours of the confrontation approached, the Draconian fleet was in disarray. Commanders had lost cohesion, squadrons were scattered, sensors failed to track targets. The humans had advanced, stabilized, and secured the frontier systems without firing a single shot at some targets. Entire fleets had vanished, entire strategies had collapsed. The Draconians could no longer rely on numbers, speed, or firepower. They had underestimated a species that fought not merely with weapons, but with foresight, intelligence, and moral resolve. The human fleet gathered above the central star of the expanse. Capital ships aligned in formation, fighters spread across orbit, and reconnaissance vessels relayed a final set of coordinates that neutralized the Draconian threat in the region. It was not destruction, it was containment through intelligence, precision, and endurance. The humans had not only survived, they had transformed the battlefield into an extension of their will, leaving the Draconians no choice but to retreat, regroup, and witness the inevitable lesson of human ingenuity. Admiral Karthos, standing aboard the flagship, observed the retreating fleets. His expression was a mixture of awe and terror. He had seen civilizations crumble, empires fall, and countless species extinguished, yet none had faced a force like this. Humanity did not merely survive, they adapted, thrived, and rewrote the rules of engagement. It was a revelation and a warning. The Draconians had entered human space expecting conquest and had instead confronted inevitability. The humans did not pursue. They did not gloat. Their presence remained precise, deliberate, and controlled. Systems were stabilized, hazards neutralized, and resources secured. Their movements, though silent, resonated across the galaxy as a testament. Intelligence, adaptability, and moral clarity could conquer the impossible, not through destruction, but through endurance and ingenuity. In the cold silence of the stars, illuminated by the fractured remains of old battles, one realization settled over the Draconian fleet. They had underestimated humanity at their own peril. They had entered a war they could not control, against a species they could not predict, and in a galaxy where survival itself had become the ultimate weapon. And as the human fleet moved on, leaving behind stabilized systems, untouched colonies, and a trail of order in chaos, one thought crystallized across every Draconian mind: the humans had not merely won, they had shown the universe that to survive, to endure, and to adapt was the ultimate form of power. The void echoed with their passage, and the galaxy would remember the lesson: never underestimate the humans.